Have you ever felt frustrated trying to get the help you need with your T1D? Me too. And it's not your fault. Navigating type 1 diabetes in today's healthcare system, it's really, really hard. My name is Scott Johnson. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 45 years. And today on Around the Circle, we're going to dig into why self-advocacy is so important and what that might look like for you and your diabetes management. Even if you have access to everything you need with type 1 diabetes, it's still incredibly difficult. But when you have to jump through extra hoops, it feels almost impossible. Today, we're talking with Rob Howe about self-advocacy and how it might just be the boost you need to overcome those hurdles. Rob's been a pillar in the T1D community for really as long as I can remember. He keeps himself very busy running a couple of businesses, a long-standing podcast called Diabetics Doing Things, playing high-level basketball, and spending some time in his spare time with his wife in the Dallas area, among many, many other things. Rob, welcome.
Scott, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And if you think I'm a longstanding pillar in the community, that's really saying something, because you were one of the people who I discovered when I didn't even know what diabetes blogging or sharing about diabetes advocacy online looked like. And so it's my pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And I'm just so glad that you're part of the world that we walk in every day. You make it a better place. So let's spend a few minutes getting to know a little bit more about you, Rob. Tell me a little bit about your story. When were you diagnosed? What was going on in your life at that time?
Yeah, so I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 20 years at the time of recording, and I was diagnosed in 2005. That was right in the middle of my sophomore year of high school. So I was 16 years old. And now looking back and meeting other people with diabetes, that is such a challenging time to manage a chronic illness. There's never a good time to manage it. But for many, the bell curve of A1C outcomes or what have you during that time are typically the worst in the course of your life. I have really learned a lot about myself from my diagnosis with diabetes and from meeting other people with diabetes. And what's really stands out to me about that time of my life is that even today, it's still the same as I love basketball. Ball is life to me. And my parents and I met with the local newspaper right shortly after I was diagnosed, and they wrote an article about me. And the headline says, "No stopping him." And in that article, my mom talks about how I'm sort of managing my disease independently and I'm very disciplined. It explains actually really well the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So it was interesting how diabetes advocacy, really from the very beginning of my journey with diabetes, has been a part of my life. But something that I think we're going to talk about today is even when you're really equipped to live with diabetes like I am and like I was, it still can cause a lot of problems because there's so many different elements that need to be managed.
Talking about the advocacy piece, is that something that you kind of jumped right into? Were you a willing participant in that advocacy, or was your life, I imagine, was also just kind of a whirlwind at that time, yeah?
Yeah, I was a pretty normal 16-year-old. I had just gotten my driver's license. I was trying to fit in at school. I was trying to carve out a space for myself on the varsity basketball team. I had dreams for my life. The advocacy piece, I think I have to credit a lot to my parents who, felt like it was important for me to, and this could be a little bit of like trauma response, which I think I see a lot in the community of, hey, we got this bad news, but guess what? We're going to be okay. And we're going to do some good and make some good of it. And I went along with that willingly. I thought it was important to do. And I wanted to be this elite athlete. I wanted to be this high level performer. And what goes along with that are sharing things with the public about your life in a way that could potentially help someone. So I think that's where a lot of that came from. You'll see I'm surrounded by sports in my office. I like I said, love basketball, and athletes have been a huge part of my people I looked up to and wanted to be like in my life. And I think sharing that part of my life felt natural because of that.
Yeah. And you went on to have a successful high school basketball career. You played high level college basketball as well at Colorado. And how was dealing with diabetes through that phase of change? Also, like life is moving fast at that point. You're trying to, earn your time on the court and a lot of high level competition there. And many of those other athletes weren't dealing with wrestling with diabetes management too.
It's a great question, Scott. Three things come up for me. You never know what you're going through at the time when you're 18. Like you're just like all living off adrenaline and vibes and trying to get out of your parents' house and like be your own person. It does seem like a lot looking back, but at the time it felt natural. I was chasing that dream of, I got a 4-year scholarship to Colorado at Colorado Springs. I got to live that dream. My parents and I made a really conscious and looking back, extremely important decision to be upfront about my T1D during the recruiting process. I was very fortunate. I was very good and had really good grades in high school. So I had my pick to go to whatever college I really wanted to go to. So we picked a place where I felt like academically, athletically, and socially I fit in. And I made a great decision. And that was, being upfront with, it took courage and having conversations with the training staff and with my coaching staff. But I felt that if I was going to go somewhere for 4 years, I needed to be upfront about what they were getting and also to be safe for myself to make sure that, this wasn't a situation where my diabetes wasn't going to be welcomed. And 90% of the time that was true. So I commend all my trainers, and my coach had a tough time, but even he, came around and wrote me a nice letter my senior year about it. So that was number one. Number two, getting on the court was really hard. I went to a program that was very old school, had a lot of older players in it, playing in a conference that was built with a lot of older, bigger guys. And it took me a couple of years to be ready for that. Lots of mental anguish, lots of work behind the scenes, and even some really challenging conditioning days with diabetes. I felt, we were talking before we started recording how Neil and I recorded a podcast and said nobody cares, and just keep going. And that's really, I wish I could give myself that mindset back then, because it felt like every time I pulled myself out for a low or high blood glucose in my practices, that my teammates were looking at me and judging me for it. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I won't lie to you and say that my diabetes didn't get in the way of my athletic career. It absolutely did, but I made the best of it. Sometimes my blood sugar was really, really high, and I just played anyway because there were only 20 games and I just wanted to play. And number three, I think, again, going to school and chasing the dream was really important for me to just learn about myself. And I had this dream of my life of being a college and professional basketball player, and it wasn't always glamorous. It wasn't always successful, but I got to do both of those things. And what it really did was give me a sense of purpose that has helped me meet people after the fact in the diabetes space. It gave me the best friends I made in my life, and it helped me learn the value of like really hard work. And playing college basketball taught me how to get up every day and face your enemy, who also happens to be the person who is going to be able to give you what you want. And that was my coach. And because I learned that discipline and diligence and perseverance, I was able to have the career that I had and have the moniker of professional athlete next to my name, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, those are some very, very valuable lessons and things you'll carry with you for your whole life. So that's kind of makes me smile thinking about it. You earned your stripes there for sure. One of the things that we think about a lot at Blue Circle Health is that it just shouldn't be this hard to stay alive. And again, even as you mentioned, when you have all the resources like a great endocrinologist, a great family system and support there, insurance that helps you pay for your supplies and your insulin, it's still really, really tough in so many ways. What does it take in your mind to actually live well with T1D?
I'm laughing, Scott. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I've been thinking about this a lot lately because people keep asking me that. They keep asking me, Rob, what does it take to live well with diabetes? You seem to be living well with diabetes. What can we learn from that? And it caused me to really think over, the past month or so, because I love what Blue Circle Health stands for and is doing in the community, because we're not just addressing the clinical and pharmacological aspects of diabetes, what we could call maybe traditional diabetes therapy.
Yeah.
you're also looking at mental health and counseling and navigating insurance and social. And so that caused me to kind of like sit down. I'm like, all right, I'm going to write down everything I can think of that it takes to live well with diabetes. And it ended up being like 5 pages full of things. And so I had to categorize it. And so it came to 4 different categories for me: physical, mental, financial, and social.
Mm.
And, I just used the F word there, the financial word that nobody really likes to talk about that much, but it really resonates when you start to think about all the decisions that we have made in our lives related to taking care of our diabetes financially. And I'll get into that later. So, what I landed on after this exercise is, all right, Rob, let's be honest here. Am I the most equipped person ever, the best equipped person ever to manage living with diabetes? And the answer, and I think it's a little bit clickbaity, is yes. I have the ability physically as an athlete. I was an athlete before being diagnosed, so I have a curiosity and a love for exercise, which helps manage my diabetes. I can understand the inputs and outputs of insulin, and I can change my sights myself, and I can see, and I have the ability. I'm an able-bodied person to be able to do all of the things that they tell you to do physically. I'm very lucky to have had parents who instilled a lifelong love of learning in my life. And, the unfortunate part about when you look at the state of the world today, just in the United States, 40% of people aren't able to read on a 4th grade or higher level, which is a lot of people. And whenever I look at macro statistics, I see people with diabetes in there. And so I know that there are people who are being told the right things, maybe they have the best endocrinologist in the world, but they don't have the tools to make sense of on a day-to-day basis while they're balancing all these other things in their life to help themselves. And so then you go on the financial side, and I think, we live in America, a capitalist enterprise. And I think I just sort of accepted that there's this framework that I'm going to have to fit in if I want to live the life that I want. And so I got good at it. And I always felt like I needed to have a job because I needed insurance or I needed
Yeah.
to be able to afford my medicine. And until really recently, and that never really occurred to me as kind of like trauma response from, oh no, like I would love to go backpacking for 2 years and disappear into Bulgaria and grow a big beard. But I never got to do that because I felt like, well, if I can't afford this diabetes care, then, what is the quality of my life that's going to, be as a result? Then you got to learn about insurance coverage and you got to learn about formularies. You got a promotion at your job. Oh, but great. They just switched insurance providers. Now a bigger chunk of your paycheck is going to cover your meds. And so there's all of that juggling going around. And then there's the social side, which I think as men with diabetes is even more important
Yeah.
because making a friend with diabetes or just knowing someone else with diabetes and having someone you could text about it is one of the biggest life hacks I could give anyone. Make a friend with diabetes is my number one piece of advice because all of a sudden, you're not doing something wrong. You're just living with diabetes. So that's like the overview of the 4 kind of quadrants. And, I've been talking nonstop for 4 minutes probably, and we didn't even cover 20% of them. So it's
Yeah.
overwhelming. It's a crazy amount of things that it takes to live well with diabetes.
And would you say that even with as well equipped as you feel, diabetes is still hard, right? Like, and that's one of the things that I think is important to get through about what we're doing at Blue Circle Health is that this is not just for those in those categories that you mentioned where there are extra boundaries, barriers in the way rather. There are things that get in the way of taking good care of living well with type 1 diabetes. Even the most well-equipped person in today's system, it's still very hard and they need more help.
A woman commented on one of my YouTube videos maybe a year ago, and she said, he makes it look so easy. And I made a video where like I apologized for it because I didn't realize that, yeah, it is easy for me in that way. But that doesn't mean that it's all easy. It's really hard. And I think there's a percentage of people who, kind of like rebel against the idea of diabetes as a disability because they don't want to give themselves permission to fail at something or whatever the case may be. And I don't think that that's wrong of them. But then I ask, my response to them is, well, how many things did you do today just to get yourself to the office or just to get yourself to school or to get yourself through the workout? Because if you didn't have type 1 diabetes, like you wouldn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of people out there living off vibes. type 1 diabetes like totally takes that away from you. And whether you're doing a good job of it or not doesn't mean it's not really difficult. And that's where I kind of made my peace with it, is that I have all the tools to manage it. Not one day has passed where I haven't thought about my diabetes in some capacity, good or bad.
It's amazing how easy we make it look, these really hard things that we're doing. Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break before we dig into more stuff here. One of our favorite things is sharing stories from people who've participated in the program. And I have one here from David in Delaware, who's been living with type 1 diabetes since 2022.
My name is David Park. I live in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2022. Living with type 1 diabetes can feel like a full-time job. There's a constant balancing act, watching glucose levels or calculating insulin or planning meals. It can also be tough to navigate the healthcare system, from getting prescriptions renewed to dealing with insurance and supply approvals. Even with great medical care and good insurance, it's easy to feel like you're managing it all on your own. Blue Circle Health has changed the way I manage my diabetes. It feels like I have a dedicated pit crew, people who are smart, encouraging, and genuinely care about helping me succeed. They've helped me fine-tune everything from insulin settings to providing support with health and nutrition to navigating insurance. It's really been a fantastic and rewarding experience.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. For this episode's Community Partner Spotlight, I want to highlight Connected in Motion. Connected in Motion builds T1D communities centered on experiences like in-person camps and outdoor adventures, along with peer-based T1D education and virtual events. I'm especially excited about their recently announced Platinum Club, which is a community for adults aged 55 and above with type 1 diabetes. Head over to connectedinmotion.ca to learn more. And that's right, they're based in Canada, but they have events here in the States and lots of virtual events that you can join from anywhere. So go check them out. Rob, welcome back. It's clear listening to your story that even as well equipped as you feel about living with type 1 diabetes, you've had to develop some self-advocacy skills. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from advocating through hard times that have stuck with you and influence how you navigate and think about your type 1 care today?
I think self-advocacy is one of the most important skills that you can develop with diabetes. And I don't even know that I had a name for it until recently, or knew or recognized what it was. But there are going to be obstacles, even when you have done all of the things right. And I think those are the things that really get to me the most emotionally, is when I've done everything I need, but my prescription now needs a prior authorization, or it's supposed to be ready and I'm going on a trip the next day and now I have to jump through some hoops. These are minor inconveniences, but diabetes fills up a lot of space and you have a lot of other things going on like I do. You don't want it to take up more than you had planned on. And so self-advocacy for me shows up as resilience. And something I've only learned recently is that resilience and resistance and friction, it's like a muscle. The more you encounter and respond to, the more you can take on. It builds your capacity. Those of you who are not exercise gurus may not know this, but you don't go into the weight room expecting to do, an extremely high personal best record on your first day, right? Compared to a professional weightlifter, for example. So I think self-advocacy shows up like that for me, where your capacity for self-advocacy today may not be very large. That's okay. We can increase it a little by little, and you can notice what things like set you off, like the example I gave. You don't have to be great at it right away. I think a lot of times it shows up the biggest way in just saying, hi, I have diabetes and I need something. I had an example with asking for orange juice at a restaurant the other day because my blood sugar was a little bit low. And I didn't say I have type 1 diabetes. It's a chronic autoimmune condition that affects 1.5 million Americans, blah, blah, blah. I just was like, hey, I need some orange juice. And they brought it to me. but that shows up as self-advocacy as well. So it doesn't always have to be keynote speeches or these big moments. It can be tiny little things built up over time.
I love that, the way you think about that, because on one hand, it doesn't take much to tip over dominoes that really disrupt our life with type 1 diabetes. And I also feel like in my life, my resilience sort of capacity, it moves and changes based on the other things, all the normal things in life that we all deal with too. So if work is hard, or if I've got some family stuff going on, then I have a reduced amount of capacity to deal with the diabetes dominoes that are falling over. But I do also like the thinking that it's a skill I can build and learn and get better at. Sometimes diabetes is just going to do diabetes, and things are going to feel pretty chaotic for a bit. And maybe the skill that I'm building here is just the ability to kind of get back up on that unicycle on the tight line, tight wire.
I agree. And I think something else that comes up for me as we're thinking about this is that your diabetes management and the outcomes of it are not a report card on your value as a person. And if you can just allow yourself to accept that, everything else gets a little easier. It's a hard thing. Everybody agrees, even me. It's a hard thing to do. So give yourself a breather. And what can we do today, one thing at a time, that will help us get to the next level that we need?
I also like to think that the outcomes that we see are not a result always of the effort we're putting in. And I think about somebody who's trying so hard, but they don't have the tools that they need, or they never got the education that is necessary, or they don't have the support, right? And so they're trying so hard and still not meeting the whatever goals they have in their head for what living well with type 1 diabetes looks like. And I just like to think like effort doesn't always equal outcomes. And sometimes it's about looking at what else do I need to live well? Do you think there are any broad principles that maybe we've talked about in terms of some of the little things that we can do to live well with T1D that can be applied broadly, almost no matter what someone's circumstances are?
I do. I think I don't want to oversimplify things because I'm not in every situation. And I want to be conscious that there are situations that are just untenable from people with diabetes. And I believe they should be given the resources that they need to live well. When I see macro statistics relative to people living paycheck to paycheck or people who are uninsured, I heard last week that Texas has the highest percentage of uninsured patients with diabetes, which hit me like a sack of bricks. And I did not like the way I felt when I heard that, because I can tell you things that apply. I think it's really important to get sleep. And I think it's really important to drink water. And I think it's really important to walk outside. But Scott, if you have to share your room with 4 other people, or you don't have clean water to drink at home, and you're not in a situation where that's, you're able to learn how important it is to drink just water, not just, whatever other, sodas or diet sodas even are out there, then it's really hard for me to find a place to connect with you. They don't want to hear that person doesn't want to hear, oh, well, you need to exercise 1 hour a day and you need to eat, protein the size of your fist with also vegetables and complex starches, and make sure that you're monitoring with your continuous glucose monitor, and hey, how about an AID system? All of these things become secondary when your basic needs aren't met and survival is your number one priority. And so, if you're living in 100% of your life in fight or flight, if you're living in paycheck to paycheck, you are fight or flight, because that one car accident puts you completely, maybe out on the street. And those are things that more people with diabetes are dealing with in this country than I think we're afraid to admit. I think that, when we think of American exceptionalism and in the media, we don't think of people like that. And there are much more people whose day-to-day reality is closer to that than we're comfortable saying.
Yeah. And when we think about that group, or those groups, or just anyone who's going through these times, I think it's very helpful to think about, all right, let me just think about, as I wake up today, I'm not sure what life is going to throw at me. I'm tired from what life threw at me yesterday, and I'm a little afraid of what's coming my direction today. Just thinking about what's one small thing that maybe feels in my control around my type 1 diabetes that feels realistic today. Like I'm going to just focus on that, and I'm going to give myself some grace and also be proud of how flexible and adaptable I am given everything going on.
I love that. And I think if you're really looking for a place to start that's more direct, I would just say, I can check my glucose today.
Is it possible? Can we identify 3 practical takeaways or maybe simple self-advocacy actions from our conversation today? If I said, "Rob, I need you to pick 3 from all this stuff we've talked about," what might those be?
Number one, you got to make a friend with diabetes. That might turn into 100 things that help you with your self-advocacy. That could be a friend on the internet. It could be a friend in real life. I highly recommend it. It changed my life. I hope it changes yours. Number two, I think is you've heard the phrase like start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I would put that into one thing, whether, like we said, check your glucose or, consider a pre-bolus before a meal or take 15 minutes after your meal and go walk around outside. Whatever that little thing is, wherever you are, start there and be willing to accept yourself where you start. Number three, release the judgment. Let it go. You know what? I was I was sitting on my couch last night. We had a Thanksgiving at my work yesterday at my company that I run, and I told my wife, I was like, you know what? I did not nail that bolus, baby. I like that. I messed it up. I flubbed it. Just awful work by me. And so I was in my meeting in the afternoon, and my blood sugar was high, and I'm just sitting in there like, you know what? I can laugh about it because I'm not holding myself. I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to do better next time, but I don't have to turn a mistake into regret.
Yeah, I love that. All right, there's a question that I like to ask at the end of every episode as we wrap things up here. What is one thing that still surprises you about type 1 diabetes even after all this time?
The thing that surprises me the most about diabetes after all this time is how delicate a balance it is. We all love to say diabetes doesn't stop me from doing blah, blah, blah. Except I see it stopping us all the time. When something goes wrong or a site, heaven forbid, a site gets kinked or occluded and we're in a meeting, people kind of get weird when you start to do lunges around the conference room table, or, you're doing jumping jacks on a Zoom and you're chugging water. And I think we're all doing such a great job. There's insane levels of achievement and advocacy coming from people with diabetes, and I'm psyched about it. I like to say that it doesn't hold me back and it doesn't force me to do things I don't want to do, but I'm lying if I say that because it's always there.
On that note, thanks so much for coming on the show today, Rob. And just also thank you for sharing so much of yourself so openly with the world. It's a better place out there because of it.
Thank you, Scott. That means a lot to me. Thank you for having me. And thank you to all the good people at Blue Circle Health who are really doing incredible work for people with diabetes who otherwise wouldn't get it. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about learning about in the diabetes space in the past year or so. So thanks to everybody. And if you made it this far, I appreciate you.
Well said. Thank you. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who might be struggling with self-advocacy and just let them know that they're not alone. And then be sure to tune in for our next episode where we're talking about some of the limitations our healthcare professionals face when helping us with our diabetes. I hope you'll join us. Until then, keep living well with T1D.